Well, this experiment has been a long time coming. We've been growing protein crystals in microgravity, we being many investigators all over the world actually, but many in the United States, for many years. It started in 1985, and we know, at least many of us feel, one of the reasons we often get crystals grown of higher quality, and these are crystals of important proteins biologically, is because they grow much more slowly in a microgravity environment compared to what you would see here with 1G on Earth. But there's another theory as to why the crystals are often better, and that theory is that in microgravity, because you have no buoyancy-induced convection or movement of the solution due to gravity, in microgravity, the only thing that makes a big protein molecule move is its vibration, random diffusion it's called. And so when you purify a protein for one of these crystallization studies, you always have a population of the single protein, we call that the monomer, but also there are aggregates. The protein is kind of stuck to itself as a dimer or a trimer, larger populations just stuck together, and they get incorporated into the crystal and cause defects. That hurts the quality of the crystal when we expose it to an X-ray beam, and the whole purpose of this experiment ultimately is to take crystals grown in space back to Earth and expose them to X-rays, and from that we get what's called a diffraction pattern that leads to the ultimate three-dimensional atomic structure of that protein. With the situation in microgravity where a crystal grows based on molecules diffusing, based on this random diffusion to the surface, without convection, because you have microgravity, without any flow in there, the molecules of a monomer are going to move much faster to the growing crystal than a dimer or larger aggregates. Therefore, microgravity is acting like a filter. It's bringing monomers to the crystal and excluding the larger aggregates simply because they move so much slower than the monomer. And therefore, there are fewer defects in the crystal, all of which leads to a more accurate three-dimensional structure of the protein. When I was a student, to determine the structure of a protein, you need a very powerful supercomputer, and it took to determine that structure 10 years. So you didn't want your career to be based on determining one structure. But today, if we have high-quality crystals on a desktop computer, first of all, we collect the data literally in 1 hour. All the X-ray data from a protein crystal, sometimes in 10 minutes, okay? And from that data, that night, we can see the structure in 1 day. And so it's revolutionized this field where now all pharmaceutical companies would love to have the structure of the protein that they're developing drugs to target. If they don't have good crystals, unfortunately, they still can't get that structure, and then they have to develop drugs the old-fashioned way, which is more time-consuming, less accurate, and the old-fashioned way is you just test literally millions of compounds, hoping one of them will have an effect on the protein. What happened in our experiment is the experiment was activated, and I think it was about 2.5 to 3 hours later, we started to see very small crystals forming in some of the capillaries. And now, a day later, we see crystals in pretty much all the capillaries. They've all grown to fairly large size, certainly large enough to collect wonderful X-ray data sets. What I'm most excited about with this particular experiment is when I give presentations at crystallography conferences, when I'm asked, yes, we know you get better crystals. Many people have experienced that, and it's helped get new structures, but why? I think this experiment is going to provide that answer, and that really is what my colleagues want to know. The Glenn Research Center has been instrumental in performing these experiments. First of all, the folks here really understand what I wanted as a scientist to glean from these experiments. And even when I'm not here, it's like I am here. They're carrying on the experiments through the night. They're working in shifts. And these crystals, of course, started growing within hours after the experiment was activated. And they started immediately imaging the crystals both with light microscopy and fluorescence. The fluorescence is going to be the key in the end, telling us if some of the aggregate is getting into these crystals, and not only that, it's going to tell us the percentage that gets in the crystals in microgravity, if any. Right now we're seeing very little fluorescence, which is a very good sign that microgravity is acting as a filter compared to what we've seen in control experiments done on Earth, so that the whole community will better understand why this is such an important platform for protein crystallization.